So welcome everyone to this third talk of our spring session at Mountain Cloud, Crossing Over, Fully Arrived. We're living the heart of Zen, practicing Zazen in the here and now. Alive, alert, absorbed, available, coming home to the other shore and finding it to be none other than this shore. For the past 2 days, we've been keeping company with Joshu, Mu, a sun with stone melting power, and the stone bridge, donkeys and horses, the 10,000 myriad things, all freely crossing. For today, I'd like to turn to another ancestor, Master Hogen or Fayan, born some 77 years after Joshu, one overlapping generation later. Hogan appears in a core group of koans across 3 collections, and there's a record of at least some of his teaching. The case that we're going to take up today shines with the directness and simplicity for which Hogan is known. And it shines with beauty. This is case 51 of the Book of Equanimity, or Shoyoroku. It mustn't matter, but I wish we could hear this dialogue in its original Chinese. Here it is in English. Let's listen for the music as well as the meaning. The case. Hogan asked senior monk Kaku, "Did you come by boat or by land?" Kaku said, "By boat." Hogan said, "Where is the boat?" Kaku said, "The boat is on the river." After Kaku had withdrawn, Hogan asked a monk nearby, "You tell me, did that monk who was here just now have the eye or not?" E-Y-E-I. It's believed that the Kaku in this case may have been a Dharma era of Joshu, or maybe simply a deeply seasoned monk. Hogan came to be known as the great seeing eye, or the Dharma eye of great clarity. One of the 5 schools of Chan Zen was established in his name, spread by Hogan and his disciples. There's a well-known story about Hogan as a monk. He's wandering on pilgrimage with 2 other monks. They arrive at Chiso's temple in the middle of a snowstorm and need a place to stay. Chiso meets Hogan at the gate. What brings you here? I'm wandering about on pilgrimage. Chiso asks, what is pilgrimage? Hogan says, I don't know. Chiso responds, not knowing is most intimate. That case says Hogan experienced some awakening. That's our inheritance right here. I don't know. I don't know if I'm doing this right. I don't know about this practice. I don't know if I'll ever awaken. I don't really know what this is all about. Not knowing is most intimate. The storm abates, and as the three monks prepare to leave, Chiso meets Hogan again at the gate. I'll read this little passage. This is from Andy Ferguson's book, Zen's Chinese Heritage. Ferguson uses the Chinese names. I'm going to pronounce them in the Japanese way. When the snow was gone, the three monks bade farewell and started to depart. Chiso accompanied them to the gate and asked, I've heard you say several times that the three realms are only mind, and the myriad dharmas are only consciousness. I keep hearing you say that. Chiso then pointed to a rock lying on the ground by the gate and said, so do you say that this rock is inside or outside of the mind? Hogan said, inside. Chiso said, well, here it's translated, how can a pilgrim carry such a heavy rock in his mind while on pilgrimage? Quite a burden to carry that around. Hogan is struck dumb. Nothing to say. He puts his luggage down at Chiso's feet and asks him for teaching, asks him to clarify the Dharma. So each day for the next month, Hogan meets with Chiso and they speak about the way. Hogan speaks about the way and demonstrates his understanding. And each time Chiso would say, the Buddha-dharma isn't like that. Finally, Hogan says, I've run out of words and ideas. Very helpful, very ripe. I've run out of words. I've run out of ideas. Chiso says, If you want to talk about Buddha-dharma, everything you see embodies it. At these words, Hogan experiences great enlightenment. If you want to talk about this real world, about this Buddha-dharma, this awake world, everything, everywhere you look, embodies it. So Hogan becomes Chizo's Dharma heir, and Chizo was the Dharma heir of this fantastic master Gensha or Wansha. Hogan gets invited by a provincial governor to become the abbot of a monastery that was already established. There's a record of Hogan's first address to that assembly. This is on dedication day. It says, on dedication day, Hogan remained sitting in the tea hall and did not leave it. A monk said to him, "Monks from everywhere are now crowded around the master's Dharma seat, waiting for you to speak." Hogan said, "In that case, the monks are practicing with a genuine worthy." After a while, Hogan ascended the Dharma seat. A monk said, "The assembly has gathered. We ask the master to expound the Dharma." And Hogan says, "You've all been standing here too long." Then he says, "Since all of you have assembled here, I can't say nothing at all. So I'll give you all an expedient that was offered by one of the ancients." So here is his teaching, received by one of the ancients, one of the ancestors, this passed on teaching, this one turning word. Hogan says, "Take care." And then he leaves the Dharma seat. Take care. There are other wonderful bits and pieces of Hogan's teaching. A monk asks him, "What was the style of the ancient Buddhists?" And Hogan says, right out of his own experience, "Where can it not be completely seen?" Elsewhere, a monk asks, "What is a true patch of earth?" And Hogan says, "Not a single patch of earth is true." If you were here a couple of days ago talking about Mu, this student who said practicing with Mu is like sitting on a trap door. Not a single patch of earth is true. This groundless ground, there's no place to stand, no place to sit. What is this? And one last example. I like this one. There's a story that in former times, a monk lived alone in a cottage. Above his door, he wrote the word mind. Above his window, he wrote the word mind. And on his wall, he wrote the word mind. Mind is no other than door, window, wall. Just to make sure that he's remembering this, that he's clear about it. Mind. Hogan hears about this and says, above his door, he should have written door. Above his window, he should have written window. And on his wall, he should have written the word wall. One version of this, the account of this story, has Kaku there with Hogan. And he's asked about this exchange. The record says, Kaku answered Hogan genuinely. A wall is a wall, a window, a door, a door. Very genuine. Nothing covered, nothing to cover. So here we are at this encounter in case 51. Crossing the river, Kaku arrives. In the Chinese and Japanese version of this case, the koan is announced with one word. It tends to fall off in our translations, but that first word, attention or presenting, and then comes the case, calls to mind the listen. We looked at, I guess it was day one, the heart of that koan, the whole of the Dharma right there. Listen. In this case, announced attention. But then the presentation is more subtle, incomparably subtle, and minutely profound. Senior monk Kaku arrives and Hogan asks, did you come by boat or by land? Kaku says, by boat. Such a simple exchange, transparent. But Hogan, maybe just to be sure, checks further. Where is the boat? And then Kaku. The boat is on the river. Beautifully presenting. One can say, there's the boat. Or God. But more to the point, maybe simply to taste the beauty. The boat is on the river. I'm told this is really quite exquisite somehow in the Chinese and Japanese. But even in translation, somehow everything put to rest. The boat is on the river. in his added sayings to the case, Master Bansho praises Kaku's answer. You know, in the Book of Equanimity, this Shoyoroku, the cases begin with an instruction by Bansho, and there's some other material by Bansho, and then Wanshi has its commentary. So there are these added sayings by Bansho, and he says of Kaku, he speaks profoundly of true reality and skillfully expounds the essentials of the Dharma. By boat? I came by boat. The boat is on the river. Yamada Kon Roshi, who I've been speaking about, he often acknowledged his deep affinity with Hogan, his favorite among the ancestors. Not a master of words, Hogan, like Unman or others, but a depth of clarity that's directly expressed. What Kon Roshi most appreciates in various places, he says, is that for Hogan, there's absolutely no difference between what you call the worldly Dharma and the Buddhist Dharma, between phenomena and essential reality. What the Heart Sutra calls form, emptiness, not the slightest gap. There's no other emptiness than this. And this. To say a door is a door in no way flattens it. It just opens out in these dimensions, 360 degrees by 360 degrees. A door is a door, or just door. Ryan Roshi, Yamada Ryon, has said that among all the cases with Hogan, this one with Kaku, he feels, is most important. Even though it isn't Hogan who says the phrase, the boat is on the river. He elicits it. It's such an intimate exchange. Where is the boat? The boat is on the river. Just that. A couple of times over the years, I've heard Ryan Roshi share a story, quite touching, of lying on the bed where his father died, just resting for a few minutes. Lying there, and a line from Dogen came to mind. The eyes are horizontal, the nose is vertical. The eyes are horizontal, the nose is vertical. Roshi said, I had some experience. The boat is on the river. Kaku leaves and Hogan turns to a monk standing nearby, presumably his attendant. You tell me, did that monk who was here just now have the eye or not? And was he clear? Did he see? What a question. At the end of his commentary to this case, Master Wanshi writes, "Where are the monk's eyes?" Under his eyebrows. What a world. Dogen has a chapter in the Shobo Genzo called The Bodhisattva's Four Methods of Guidance. The first method is giving. Giving. I read from it a bit this morning. But in this chapter, under this heading, giving, this first method of guidance, Dogen writes, to launch a boat or build a bridge is an act of giving. If you study giving closely, you see that to accept a body and to give up a body are both giving. To leave flowers to the wind, to leave birds to the seasons are also acts of giving. Where is the boat? Right there. The boat is on the river. There it is. Acts of giving. Maybe that has something to do with the beauty. Or maybe it's the simple, indivisible fact. Did you come by boat or by land? For Hogan, these are not two. Empty, infinite. And each is all of it. Boat, all of it. Land, all of it. Hogan and Kaku share this world so freely. This intimacy, this world. Keep saying, anywhere you turn in this Dharma, you hear nothing but now. It's now. Ryan Roshi and Yamada Kun Roshi both have transcribed Teisho on this case. Wonderful to read them just side by side. Father, son, Dharma air. Here's a passage from Ryan Roshi. It strikes me. To savor the splendor of Kaku's answer, you must have clearly and experientially understood two things. First, the boat on the river. Aside from this fact, Roshi writes, there is nothing else. The one who is seeing this must have completely disappeared without leaving a trace behind. I mean, really see that. The boat is on the river. There's nothing outside it. There's nothing to leave behind. And then the Roshi says, to say it with a different expression, the whole universe is just a boat floating on the river. And then he says, Kaku's phrase, the boat is on the river, in its every word and every syllable is exactly the same thing as that boat floating on the river. Can you get it? That is the boat. The boat is on the river. That is you, your whole body. And that is your practice. Such beauty. What is it about the encounter with beauty to really see it, face it? Your separate self cannot survive. Suddenly flashed on the immensity of the mountains here in the distance, now covered with snow, and the constantly changing cloud formations. See that. And you're God. Just mountains. Bancho's introduction to this case ends with this line. If you suddenly become completely one, can you articulate delusion and enlightenment or not? That's one translation. Can you distinguish? Can you divide? Can you find anything like separation? And to this, Ryon Roshi comments, if you suddenly become completely one, means if you suddenly realize that this whole universe is only one existence. With this realization, Roshi goes on, the very notion of enlightenment or delusion vanishes. This is quite natural because the person who thinks in terms of becoming enlightened or remaining deluded disappears. It is obvious that enlightenment and delusion are also blown away. He goes on to bring home the same point in other words. You come to realize that enlightenment and delusion are really the same thing. The other shore, this shore, crossing over, fully arrived, never leaving home. And still, and so we practice. Yamada Konroshi died after a fall and an illness in September of 1989. Tributes poured in from around the world from students and Dharma heirs. It occurred to me to read a few from Ruben Habito, Elaine McGinnis, Joan Reek, David Loy. There's a lovely little book, In Memoriam, Kon Yamada Roshi. You can find these tributes and more online. It's a wonderful web. the overwhelming message, reading them one after another. The message of Yamada Kon Roshi's presence right now is compassion, wisdom that pours itself out in boundless compassion, compassion that cannot leave. I think it was David Loy who says in his tribute, now that the Roshi is gone, we see all the more clearly that he cannot leave. The boat is on the river. Instead of those tributes, I'd like to end with Kon Roshi's own poem, deeply familiar to some, always powerfully fresh. He wrote it on December 8th, 1984, December 8th, Bodhi Day, that day when we commemorate the Buddha's awakening. So the poem was written about 5 years before he died. I have this old copy, like, a copy of a copy. I don't know if you can see it all. It's so, faded, but here it is. Once an old Buddha said, "The mind of bright wisdom is nothing but the mountains, rivers, great earth, the sun, moon, and stars." One night I realized this all of a sudden. Heaven and earth collapsed and were reduced to dust. Clearly, I have seen not one thing. No man, no Buddha. My karmic sins were all extinguished as if in a bolt of lightning. And what is it, after all? Nothing special, just this. Just this. You see how my eyes are? They don't talk. And they look void of any anxiety. My eyes don't talk. What do they see? With deep and abiding gratitude to Hogan, Yamada Kon Roshi, to all the ancestors, named and unnamed. Let's continue our practice. Thank you for this shared practice.